All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the data freezing track call for September. If you have never been to one of these calls before, we are a part of an organization called the Campus Research Computing Consortium, or CARC. We kind of have two parts of it. There's one part called the People Network that's just kind of a monthly virtual conference. And we have a bunch of different tracks, such as the data facing track, which is more about data, and like systems facing track, which is more about running supercomputers. And then there's also a second side of it that's working in interest groups. If you have an idea about some kind of deliverable that's needed for the community, you can create one of these groups, or look at all the stuff that's going on right now and pitch into what's going on there. There's a number of different activities going on that could use some help. So if you'd like to find more information about that, we've got a whole bunch of links to our page in the call document under the announcements. Whole bunch of stuff there to explore. Speaking of which, if everyone could sign in on our call document, that would be great. This is how we track our numbers that we're getting in the call so that we can ask NSF for more money. Cool. And this is also a communal place to take notes, so feel free to enter questions there. Take notes on answers to all these questions. Today's going to be a little different. So last month, we had a talk with kind of a provocative title called Artificial Intelligence, the Beginning and End of Human Wisdom. If you have not seen that, I'll put a link in to the recording. But yeah, it sparked a lot of interest. So, and the second thing is we were not able to get to all the questions last month. So we just wanted to kind of have a follow-up where we just kind of continue discussing like AI, how it can be useful, how it can be harmful, and how we want to incorporate it into our field. And so the first question that I promised to start with, one was about what kind of content is used to train these different AI applications. Does it leverage particularly students' content? And have you secured everyone's consent to donate their materials to these kind of AI projects? And I think this particular question came up in regards to using AI as kind of a supplementary teaching assistant, basically. So yeah, folks are curious, like, about the concept of using students' works, period, to help train these AI. Use case was from Clemson. Thank you, Amy. Any thoughts on that question?
Well, I don't know this particular case, so it's hard for me to talk about this case, but I can tell you that Azure OpenAI, so what it does is it gives you access to OpenAI, but there are constraints, there are limitations that Microsoft puts on it to make it safer. So in this case, actually, there is a pretty clear agreement that whatever you submit is not used for training. So it is considered to be a safe environment for kind of low and mid risk data. So if this is used, then you don't have to be concerned about submitting it and using it for training. In other cases, if you use just Bing, ChatGPT, that is all open. That then you do. I mean, you either have to consent to it, or with your faculty, or have some kind of policy within your institution. So this is a different matter. So it's important to distinguish and know what you're doing. But there is an option. Azure OpenAI gives you well, basically a lot of capabilities and flexibilities that you would have otherwise too. So it is definitely an option to use it for teaching or instructions.
But I think Anna introduces a good thought, making sure that people are really aware of the terms of use, which I actually made a student sit down and read the terms of use for OSF today. And it's not something I notice that people do very often, but it takes time and then to make sure, but you have to consent to everything or not, right? So, but I think that's something that we really need to stress with our students and then with the people using these tools. And I think Amy has a comment, and then Anna, do you want to respond to that?
I just want to respond quickly. Actually, I do think that to delegate like individuals, whoever, even like faculty and researchers, I think it's very difficult for people to process everything individually. I think it's much better if there is somebody, and actually I'm preparing like presentations and workshops to educate the whole community, so that there is some kind of central knowledge that can be distributed across, and then people can take it from there. But I think relying just on individuals, especially students, I think it's a little more challenging.
Right, and Amy Nurnberger?
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really interesting question, and it crosses over. It's wonderful to know that Azure provides those protections. At the same time, it's absolutely necessary, even within a protected system, that you're dealing with both issues of FERPA and IP in reusing students' content in these ways. I know, as an instructor myself, even when I wanted to, use students' papers or example as an exemplar for the next class, like this was a really well done example of that project. You have to have your students sign a thing giving you consent with full knowledge, and simple participation in the class, I believe, has been demonstrated legally as insufficient as to indicate agreement that the instructor can use the student's work unless there are specific conditions that are met. Not to mention, if you're developing this type of thing, you have to run that across IRB and address it from those perspectives as well. So the question, I think the initial question is very on point, is like, how do you not only secure everyone's consent, but manage the record keeping of that consent for which materials, and manage the complexity that is implicit in that space as well. So thank you.
Amy, can I make a question that might help me clarify? My understanding is that IRB would be looking at whether or not it's considered research. And if it's not defined as research, they might give an exemption. So when you mentioned IRB, what is the context that you're thinking of?
Because I don't know if this was possibly being developed under a research project or just outside for instruction purposes, I don't know if IRB would apply or not. But I can certainly see this being adapted into a research project or being done as part of a grant in these spaces, whether that's an education grant or some other field of space, certainly could be classified as research as well as just an independent instruction project.
I think one of the I just have a comment. This is Moitali. I think it, as Amy Nurnberger was pointing out, that the administration of consent is very difficult, right? Especially students who might leave this institution and then their data is left back. And what purpose, because the purpose is constantly going to change, right? As with many data. And it's hard to get to track down the participants and know what to do, you know, and rarely do we have research projects that are so quick in the cycle of collecting data and delivering something, right? The way we do in AI. I mean, someone might do cancer research, and by the time something's discovered, the person who contributed it might not even be able to be part of it. But this is so different. So I think that privacy then becomes even more important. And that's something to keep in mind. The other thing I always think is, what is the setting in institutional culture of getting consent? Because we can't stigmatize people who do or don't give consent. You know, it's a soft topic, but I feel like with AI, just coming up everywhere, what is like the cultural context and the landscape? What does that look like? Thank you. Just wanted to throw those ideas up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. I really like. I didn't attend the talk last month, but I reviewed the summary of the conversation, and interestingly used Parrot AI to summarize the talking points of the meeting, just so I could actually get a condensed version of what was being discussed. But I like the questions that were being raised at the points. I think the Harvard actually has come out with some recent guidelines on AI and ML use, and they now have a couple of sandboxes for I think like OpenAI and ChatGPT, these sorts of things. I like the idea of delineated into buckets of research and teaching tools, because I think if it's not research, likely the IRB doesn't need to be involved, although I'm sure there are other processes. But in terms of as a teaching tool, it's an interesting question. And if your university has a license for using these AI capabilities, then I think that also indicates that you have rights to all the data, and they're only going to use those models on your data and not anywhere else. And so I guess as a question, is this a problem if you're putting in students' papers or essays or whatever to either do an analysis or to further train those models for the academic use? So that's a question for the group here. I'd like to also throw out another question, but I can bring it up later on sort of the end of wisdom and critical thinking, but I'll leave that one for later.
That's kind of a perfect segue into our second question in the doc. So someone wants to see if there's interest to talk about what guidance institutions are providing for using these tools. It looks like Montana State has provided some kind of guidance. Are any other institutions? Sounds like Harvard is. And an addendum, if your institution has some of this guidance, can you share a link to it?
Yeah, I'll just say, because I raised it, I think Harvard just published their guidelines only like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. It's really, really new. And then the business school has an addendum with that as well. So it's hot off the presses.
With these guidelines, I mean, do these guidelines cover other, searching information on with Google and things like that too? I mean, I use my PRIA generative AI teaching assist co-instructor as a search tool. It searches large language models and
To the point of search tools is, at least with some generative AI bots, they aren't just search tools, they're also used for creating things. Right? That's the whole reason why actors and writers are on strike in Hollywood. Like the writers in particular are striking because the what do you call them? The big producing companies want to use AI to write their scripts. And it's not just that they're searching for scripts, it's that these generative AIs are producing scripts from sometimes copyrighted works. Yeah, if it was only searching, I don't think it'd be as big of a problem.
yeah, so the sun goes down and the sun comes up. I mean, there's good and bad, right? So
Yeah.
my students are the problem with art is intractable, right? I mean, the concept of artists owning their own work, I don't know how that's ever gonna come back. It's gone. I don't know. It's terrible. I have lots of artists in my family. I get it, but the scientific literature is an open compendium of knowledge that you're allowed to pull from, and you have to cite people when you're citing facts, but there's also common knowledge like DNA stores information. I don't have to cite that. I don't have to cite Francis and Crick and whatever I have to do, right? You can use AI to go search the body of programming to learn Python. I use it for teaching Python programming, and I also use it for finding scientific knowledge. Just like when people ask me in my class, these questions, the AI that we're using is giving similar answers, if not way better actually, for the coding than I am. So I understand what you're talking about, but there are multiple use cases of AI, and definitely ethics need to be baked in, right? And FERPA is control. I'm got FERPA all under control. I don't know what else to do. I mean, there's millions and millions of papers out there. I can't read them all, and they're all supposed to be accessible. Most of the ones that are accessible, the ones that are in the large language models, and it's pulling information from them. And there's plenty of better ways to do it than using like ChatGPT for large language models. There's other large language models that probably still need to be invented to be able to really tap into some of the data we need. But I'm trying to use AI to teach people how to code and cure cancer. I'm not teaching people how to cheat and write their own essays. If they do that, I'm sorry. We have a cheating policy at my university, and if they're caught cheating, then I have to abide by the policy. But I'm not a police officer. I'm a scientist trying to train people how to do stuff, and this is an excellent tool to do it.
So Alex, I wanted, this is actually sort of my very question around the end of wisdom, and I want to
sorry, did you say the beginning of wisdom or the end?
I think it's actually both. I think
Both?
it's one's approach. And so the way I want to look at it is I know we can do Medline and all these other things for abstract searching, and then if you summarize a paper, I don't need ChatGPT or whatever. There's an abstract, and so, but for non-scientific literature and scientific papers, I could imagine that I could this is actually to the whole group actually, that I could imagine that I could go in and summarize some of the materials, like get a summary on it. Hard easier to do now than ever, but I don't think necessarily that we can say it's the end of critical thinking, because I think that those summaries and some of the points could be used as a stepping stone to build and write papers on critical thinking, and you could use the AI as a tool to assist you with making some of the making those leaps and progressions, revisions. And so as opposed to I'm going to cheat and have it write a paper. So that's where I want to question, if students are just taking it in and spitting it out, well, obviously, it's probably a cheat, but if there's steps to actually use it as a teaching tool for literature, for writing, for whatever, isn't that a positive way? And how could one approach things so it's less of the former and more of this latter?
All I know is if I have quizzes, I have a lot of my stuff's been online. Right before COVID, I started moving to hybrid models. It's a perfect timing for COVID or whatever. If you take my quizzes and Google them, you find the answers. The students post all the answers. They post all their essays. It's like instantaneous. I mean, so people, this whole cheating using the internet thing has been rampant, and I'm surprised it's the level that it's at. I teach juniors and seniors and grad students. So like this isn't going to like start people cheating, using the internet to cheat. But the summary stuff is, I disagree with you on the abstract. Like if you read an abstract, it's very thin. It gives you some concept. I summarized one of my papers where we took data and put it into a quantum mechanical model. And I kind of still don't completely understand what we did years ago. And it summarizes the point where I learned from it. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is cool. Okay, abstract is a little small, yes.
Well, that's what the students I mean, I do this too. There are like, I mean, I don't know, 10 million scientific papers now, biology papers in PubMed. I can't read them all. I have to have AI to be able to summarize it. And I have to pay attention to FERPA and ethics completely. 1,000,000%. But I am not going to have, increase my probability of getting sick kids out of bed by not using the tool. Just like I'm not going to stop using Google because people cheat on it. And that's been around for, almost a quarter century, right? I'm definitely going to shut up now.
Christina, call.
Yeah, I just thought I would bring something. I know it doesn't solve the immediate problem, but I think this is kind of bringing up this, that there's a difference between learning that benefits from communal sharing of knowledge and intellectual pursuits that are individual and are based on one person putting out a skill set, right? I know I've listened, I pay attention to things like they're talking about in music, where it's getting very difficult to put out unique music because there's so much out there that's done, and people are trying to copyright common chords instead of putting that into something that everyone can add. And it's the same thing with stories. Every potential storyline has technically already been written. The only difference is the unique spin you put to it. So what this may do is actually create this, how do we utilize this tool for all of that learning that benefits, instead of getting rid of the individual hero on a pedestal. And it's, science for one has already turned to groupthink and have projects with 50 to 60 to 100 people on the project, as opposed to the lonely scholar sitting in a corner writing their magnum opus by themselves. So it may be that for those people, this tool is not useful and they shouldn't, but it's the same thing. I'm more interested in this because I work for the Federal Reserve System, but our researchers work with academic co-authors all the time. So I'm just interested in how the potential is for people to work together to understand things, because we're in the problem solving business as well. So that's just my thought. Thank you.
I have a couple of thoughts on this. So one is that actually the output that you get from these large language models can be also judged and evaluated individually in groups. So the output can be actually used for critical thinking, because as we know, there are hallucinations, there are mistakes, insufficient data, a lot of things. So it's actually can promote even deeper thinking, because there are often gaps in the results or mistakes that are not that easy to spot. So in that sense, it can be even more challenging and kind of have an incentive toward deeper critical thinking. The other thing is that there are many applications. So a lot of people are thinking about writing because it generates a text easily. It's text-based, although not only text-based. But I also experimented, and Alex has probably much more on that, actually with code generation. And I did it really just to see, because it's so quick. I mean, none of us can compete with that, right? So I think that once you see it, you might think, oh, well, if it does it like in a fraction of a second, what I will even type in probably 5 minutes. But this is only, as was pointed before, is one step. So you can learn something from it, but it cannot replace somebody who has expertise and can put all these pieces together into meaningful application. So I think it is important to teach how you take all these pieces together, even if they are quickly produced and can be correct. But then you have to stitch it together, use your judgment, use your knowledge, have best practices, well, in that case, in coding, and produce something valuable quicker and better with the help, but still your judgment and your expertise. These are kind of couple thoughts I had.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, can you all hear me? I agree, because I think that we'll deal with the, legal issues, etc. But at the end, if a student or a person says, hey, I created this magnificent piece with the help of this AI, are you going to give me the respect that I deserve, or are you going to think I'm a fraud? Socially, I think that's where we're going, right? So we have to, that's what needs to be outlined, I think. And I think that's organic. Like, people are going to get there organically, the same way people never thought digital music was real music. But now look at it,
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, I recently listened to a podcast about the origins of autotune. And so I have a feeling it will go that type of direction. It is like, it will become like its own, like in music, for example, it'll become its own subgenre in music using AI to create things. I think it's just, like we like the citation and attribution and licensing needs to kind of catch up with this is all. Yep.
I do have another question to just change a little bit, if I may, and we can put it at the end if this is not a question. From a data implementation point of view, in research, what are some examples people are finding to implement this? Like, what kind of engineers do you hire, to help with making your organization AI ready or AI fast forward? But we're in an ethics conversation now, but at the end, maybe Deb. Thanks.
I have an answer to that question when we get there.
If we're ready to switch topics, we could go ahead. Is there anything more about ethics that people want to discuss? Okay. Next question then. Right, so what sort of data engineers would you hire to conduct this kind of work around integrating AI?
Can I answer? It's hard. It's on the phone. It's so weird. So for ethics and conflict of interest, I have a company called Praxis AI, and we've engineered an AI teaching assistant, research assistant called Priya. That's what I use in my classes, and I have all the legal stuff worked out with my university for conflict of interest and everything. But we engineered it, making an API, something that makes API calls into Chat GPT is pretty straightforward. I mean, there's lots of, you probably could just and have Priya, or sorry, have ChatGPT-4 make its own code for its to access itself. But we've taken the approach of being able to have many different resources, and we have people when questions are asked, the prompt engineering in the back end is very complicated. So you need somebody to have the prompt engineering tuned in a certain way to be able to have it answer the way you want it to answer, right? And do things like get rid of hallucinations and stuff like that. We've baked all that out. When you have the ability to get the answer back from a large language model and just, ChatGPT's, they're great, right? This is an example. But then like having it and putting it, institutionalizing the thing, like we have it integrated into Canvas, into Moodle, into a platform we have and everything, where there's the ability, because it costs money to have credits and things like that, to be able to manage the money side of that, right, for the question part of it. So it takes quite a bit of engineering at the prompt engineering level, productizing the agent. But the simple fact of making an agent, which is really cool that OpenAI did it, made it really easy to make your own, API, service, I guess is the right way to say it. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks. It certainly helps, Alex, like to know the different levels where you need the different kinds of skills.
Yeah, if you wanted more detail, please contact me and I'll, tell you. My engineer can tell you way better than I can. I'm conceptual.
Did you use any fine tuning? Did you only use prompt engineering, or did you also fine tune the models?
So we haven't developed our own large language models. We intend to do that, and I'm very interested in that from like a systems biology perspective, sort of a research thing. But no, we haven't. We just tap into other large language models, but then those are the engines to get us back results that we then verify for quality and things like that. And the question about, is this stuff good? I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I'm getting old. And answers I've seen through pilots with students, the answers are as good or better than mine coming out of it. From a bioinformatics biology perspective, it's way smarter than I am, or not smarter. It's way more effective than I am.
So you found that it already works pretty well for you. You didn't feel like you needed to train on the specific. I mean, it's not trained, but it's to fine tune it really. On top of the given model, you didn't have to improve it.
No, so yeah, but there's definitely as the other models become more specialized and improve, and there's missing data and stuff like that, it's going to get better. But when I asked ChatGPT back in November, December to write something, I don't remember what it was, right? It was pretty cool for language stuff, but then the science part, it was hallucinating. It was doing a lot of things that were pretty squirrely. So we fixed all that. We have the ability to go to different sources, validate things, and there's a lot of IP and stuff behind all that, right? To make all that happen. But anyway, so we've taken, we have not changed the large language model, but I can't wait until the day where I can load up, like I've wanted to do conceptually for decade of having a large language model. I just didn't know what they were, and now that I know what they are, I can take my body of knowledge and my interdisciplinary collaborative people that I work with, dump all their stuff into one pot, mix it together, and then ask it questions, and then let's see how long cancer lasts.
Thank you.
So kind of a tangent to question about data engineers. Kind of one thing in general that has been in the back of my mind since machine learning and AI have started growing is like people throw it at everything, and like there's some use cases where like Netflix, you only care about like getting the best recommendation for whoever's watching. But when you're trying to like analyze some scientific data, I always remember like my intro to statistics class that's like, you have to choose one hypothesis. And if you start measuring against a whole bunch of different hypotheses at the same time, then just statistically, one of them will be supported by your statistics. So that just has always been running in my mind when people just kind of try to throw machine learning at everything. Like I think there's this R package called Superlearner where it just like tries a bunch of different models with a bunch of different parameters at once and gives you like the one that has maximizes whatever statistic you're trying to maximize. Like, that just kind of has always felt a little weird to me, considering the messages from statistics.
Deb, can you repeat what was your question? I listened but didn't quite understand. You had a question. What is the difference between machine learning and statistics? Is that the question?
No, it's more describing kind of what I've been thinking is that like a lot of applications for machine learning are just like go for whichever model or algorithm maximizes your accuracy. Which when you compare that with for example clinical trials, you can only measure one variable at a time.
Yeah.
Like if you try to do like 20 comparisons, one of them will likely be positive just because of random chance.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's kind of what a lot of people have been doing with machine learning. And I guess my question, like, is that okay?
Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, I can speak a little bit about it because I have been in this field for more than 5 years, and I actually work both on the side of the algorithm development and applications, and applications not just for research, but actually for clinical care. So very high risk, high stake. So yes, that is that's absolutely true that machine learning has a different approach, which is instead of finding one variable or even a set of variables, it's actually looking for patterns. And the reason that is now some of the models are considered to be breakthroughs is not only because it's on a large amount of data, because they're fast, but because simply using statistical methods or experiments themselves are either extremely complicated and time consuming or not even possible at all. So it's the idea is that if you feed enough data to an algorithm, to a model, that it can learn, usually when we say it learns something, it really means often patterns. So it's in this business of kind of looking at many parameters, especially if you think about images, right? Images have a lot of degrees of freedom. It's not even like you measure this, you measure that. It's a lot of different things put together. So yeah, so machine learning is different in that sense. It's also different in the sense that when you want to go back and say, why did it choose this particular, why does this model even work, right? what did it find to make that, well, in medicine, it will be that diagnose, or in any other field like this kind of maybe classification. It's actually very difficult to know this. It's because of the way these models learn. They don't learn one by one, or they don't learn just a discrete number of combinations. They learn sort of almost like holistically. So this is why you really never know if a particular model will work well with that data set, and you never really can clearly explain why that model works for this data set and why it gives that kind of decision. So this is why there is a lot of usually reservation. It's often called a black box because of all this. But the argument on the other hand is that, well, not everybody learns things only in a straightforward logical way anyway, right? We sometimes have an intuition. We kind of know that we are right because many things come together, but it's hard for us to clearly identify how we put them together. So that is kind of but yeah, you're absolutely right that there is a difference between how traditional statistics approaches these problems and how machine learning really works in these cases.
I find is that, I work with it's highly dimensional data, like the zygote to me over 53 years of 200 and at least 200,000, probably a lot. It probably could go up to 500,000 to 1 million variables to make me who I am right now, which could lose some weight, and I still would like to be taller even after all these years. But anyway, that's where I'm at. This multidimensional stuff, when you look at the genome level, statistics no longer works. The concept of not having a statistical framework for big data is the problem, and so this does allow us to find patterns in a holistic way. And I wonder if we've reached a new renaissance where we are moving from a reductionist scientific level to a holistic level using some of these tools. I'm positive we are. I can't prove it as a scientist yet. I've published some papers as weak evidence, but I think that's what's happening. Is we're in a major inflection point in our history of our species. Thank God, given the problems we have.
Can I add to this? Because I don't want to be on one side of this argument. So my education is in physics, and physical models are known for being able to predict, set aside the quantum physics, but you have a set of parameters, what they should be, and you have a solution, right? You have a result, you have an outcome. So this is very different, but I would argue that relying only on pattern recognition and thinking that all the solutions are there is also not quite right. I think that there is, these are kind of twins, they're different, but I think we need both of them. I just wanted to make that.
Yes, thank you you're absolutely right. I totally agree. But when you couldn't see the patterns at all, you're completely in the dark. At least now I have a little bit of light, and then I can start to do predictive modeling and things like that. And in biology, we're kind of in trouble because we don't know what the organizing principles are of all of these things, right? We don't understand it. In physics, there's less. Well, there's 13 dimensions to a string, and not 500,000.
Right, and that's exactly, that's true for medicine as well, right? When the same seems like set of parameters work for one patient and not work for another.
Exactly.
Or, there are many other dimensions. Yeah, that is absolutely true. That physics and biology are very different, and approaches are also not the same. Yeah.
I think that what both Anna and Alex you're saying also is leading to the rest of us, well, me, who hasn't really worked in AI very much, that things are getting so specialized and non-specialized at the same time, right? And I wonder going forward if the STEM subjects might bias the thinking more than the arts that need it more. I don't know how to change that, but I just know that that might be on the, like, who's gonna be an engineer who works in this? You know, it's just hard to find the skill set. I'm always worried about skill set, guys, because I'm so recruiting is top of the mind with engineers, right? So that's always, you know, it's just, it would be very unfortunate if it's not proceeding in the same way, or if somehow we can't, you know, make a tool accessible by all kinds of fields. Oh,
That
thank
is,
you.
that is exactly why my company exists. Exactly for that purpose, is to skill people in data-intensive computing skills, including AI. So it's democratized. So it's not just in the hands of the elite. It's in the hands of as many people as possible, so that people can make their own decisions and not have to rely on the decisions of intuition, of the intuition that comes out of institutionalized structures that run our planet. They're outdated. We need to change.
Well, I just want to chime in on that. It's like, I think you can lead a horse to water. Let's just put it that way. My spouse is a science educator in K through 12. He's department chair. He's been doing it for 30 years. It's just astounding how, and you know, he teaches, I think, an intro level biology class or general sciences class, and he tells the students, you know, you really need to focus on learning here. This is the last science or biology class you're ever gonna have in your life. You know, and so we've got bigger problems than you know, AI, you know, sneaking in on this. I think that there are some fundamental problems around education and science education, for especially for, you know, life learning and critical thinking.
Can I chime in on that one too? I think that it's really important to understand that there is a difference between what you can get from these very well-trained models and what your critical thinking and all the knowledge can bring. And the difference is that the models are trained on the past data, and we have a lot of unprecedented events in our, like, watch the news, look what happened in Maui, look what is going on in Florida. I mean, none of these events actually are easily predictable because they're unprecedented. Well, I'm in Southern California. We had to think about rain in the summer. Who would think of that? I mean, we have everything green, never happens. So these are, you know, if you tried to use these models, they will not be able to predict it for one very simple reason. There was never data like that. So they act on the existing precedent. Think about economy, and I'm not going to go everywhere, but I'm just giving examples that are in the news and everybody is exposed to. So it is important to teach critical thinking. It is important to understand that not everything will be given on this plate with you know, machine learning, because it has to exist before it's trained. And if it wasn't trained on it, it's not there.
Yeah, I understand. Like, I agree, Anna, what you're saying, but at the same time, don't you think the STEM subjects, like, we are going to make our models way better than, say, someone who didn't get trained in programming or AI thinking, and they are an artist or a musician? I'm not saying those are separate necessarily, you know, but I'm just saying, like, or marginalized populations, right, who don't have access to getting points and credits. I just think that there can become a very, very easily a class system within this about using this tool.
I think I thought it was actually the other way around, but maybe I'm wrong. I think that because it's so open, I mean, that is why it's so widely used, because it was I think more closed before than it is now. I think it's more open, and it's a positive and negative at the same time. This is, I mean, nobody talked, I mean, not maybe nobody, but STEM talked about AI, but probably not many more people outside of it, up until ChatGPT. ChatGPT brought everybody on the feed because it became so accessible, it's so easy. Everybody uses it. No matter if you're 80 or 8 years old, it's open to you and people experimenting. So in that sense, I think this is where people think often about the danger, because people are not educated, as Alex is saying. It's important to educate people, but it's already available. So when you compare arts with STEM, I do think that arts require a lot of creativity, and I would make the same argument that whatever is created by these models is based on what has existed. If that book has not been written, it's not going to write it. If somebody is going to write it, he or she is going to write it, not to generate via AI. Even though it generates text, but I mean, like, it's something we would like to read, if of course we don't lower our standards.
All right, folks, thank you for such an interesting discussion. We will see you next month.